Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the show. You know, folks, last episode we had was all kinds of problems. There was a problem with Newsweek printing out an article whereby they said in the article that everyone knows this case, that the DNA on the knife sheath that was reported to have Brian Kohberger's DNA on it was blood DNA. And that turned out to be absolutely false. But on the show, I did compare it to the probable cause affidavit. I didn't say that it was true. What I said, Newsweek is reporting this, that the DNA on the knife sheath reportedly was blood DNA. And unbeknownst to me, that afternoon, maybe you can't see this retraction here, but this is their retraction, or their idea of a retraction. And at the very bottom of the article, it says, update, 10/7/23 at 3:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This article was updated to reflect that the DNA sample found in the murder house was touch DNA. What professional news organization would refer to their report or refer to 1122 King Road, the crime scene where 4 students were murdered? Who would refer to that as the murder house? So this caused a big stir, of course, on my channel, and everyone was saying, oh, you reported it. I reported it as just I said. I reported it as Newsweek is reporting that the DNA evidence on the K-bar knife sheath, the K-bar knife sheath, is blood DNA and not touch DNA. There is a very similar sheath around that knife you see right there. So that was problematic because when we compared it against the probable cause affidavit, there was no such report of that. It instead said that the DNA was in fact touch DNA and had said nothing about any blood. So that was a little disconcerting to me. And in fact, I pulled up the probable cause affidavit to show that the officer that recovered it spoke about how it was, in fact, he didn't see any blood on it. It was reported as touch DNA. So I don't want to beat this to death, but a lot of people in the chat really felt that it was, oh, you should have been right on top of it. Well, I was on top of it, and I reported that it was touch DNA and not blood. And then, unbeknownst to me, as I said, Newsweek recanted that in that brilliant recantation they did there, calling it the murder house. I think that's somewhat unprofessional to call a crime scene location where 4 college students lost their lives, to call that the murder house. Here's the little flyer you could see tonight. Professor Mike Geary will be joining me. So the title, Kohberger, Newsweek disavows blood evidence. And they just claimed it was a mistake. No, it was a colossal mistake. How did you write a story with that in it, and you knew it was untrue, and then do this little tiny retraction hours later? Is that what, certain politicians call it, fake news? Is that what fake news is? Because that's what it appeared like to me. And I'm not satisfied with that, pulling it back, that recantation of this is, oh, sorry. We were wrong. It was a mistake. Really? It was a mistake. Okay. So folks, hang on to your hats, hang on to your wig, hang on to your toupee, whatever you have on, because you're joining Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. And in a little while, Professor Mike will be joining me to dissect this case, to see if there's new information in the Kohberger case. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped in 10th and Ranch by Kohberger.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. So, folks, tonight I have with me one of the crowd favorites, the fan favorites, the subscriber favorites, our friend favorites, retired NYPD sergeant, attorney, professor, and if he has time later, maybe a confession or two, Mike Geary. Mike, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Billy. That's some introduction. Thank you very much. Good to see everybody. It's good to see you.
Well, you know, Mike, many people always ask, where's Mike? Where's Mike been? You know, and it hasn't been that long, but when you're not here, people, and same thing, they ask me, where's Detective Phil? And, you know, I know you guys have lives, so I ask you when you're available to come on the show. You know, Mike, one of the things that I've been looking at, and of course, everyone's looking at the evidence in this. There's the folks that believe Brian Kohberger is guilty, and there's folks that believe he's innocent. And guess what? None of us matter. You know, the only thing that matters is the 12 people in that jury box. That's what matters. And when it eventually goes to trial. Before I forget, though, I just wanted to show, someone said to me, I said, clearly in one of the pictures when Brian Kohberger was pulled over by the Indiana State Police, you could see a cut on his right wrist. Is that clear to you there, Mike?
I could see a little bit, yeah, down along the bottom ridge of his
right.
right.
So you got to understand also, this was over a month later.
Right.
So that could have been, or very likely was, a severe cut that healed. But, you know, when I spoke about that last night, it was newest. Everyone was like shocked. What do you mean? So I searched for it and I pulled it up and I made a still out of it. It was very difficult to play the video and then stop it, and it degrades the video. So there it is. There absolutely is a cut on his right wrist there. And again, it's in the healing phase, it appears to be. So if that occurred during the commission of these crimes, there's also, we wonder then, where is the blood inside the crime scene? However, other new evidence, of course, in the Howard Bloom, our favorite Howard Bloom, the writer who writes for Airmail, he claimed that, you have sort of verified this, that Brian Kohberger bought a Dickies jumpsuit, one of those work suits, and there's actually in the probable cause affidavit, or in the evidence affidavit in one of the warrants, there is a receipt for Dickies jumpsuit. So all of these little pieces of evidence, and it's so, believe me, it's so hard to keep track of all of them if you're not actually a case detective or have access to the case folder where you read it all the time, you take notes. You know, part of my job as a sergeant in the detective bureau for my 16 years in the detective bureau was to go over cases. And after a while, you know, you learn how to dissect them pretty well. But after a while, when you read all of this stuff, your brain turns to mush, and you really have to take notes and even make your own timeline and write down things that mean something inside the case. So a case like this that's so complicated, so much evidence, so much discovery, not very easy, Mike.
Yeah, Billy, there's a lot to unpack, a lot to understand. You know, there was a 6-week investigation. They followed him across country. You know, they had DNA, touch DNA from early on. Everybody knew it was touch DNA. Had that. Then they matched him up with blood taken from a buccal swab.
Buccal
swab, right? Buccal swab from his cheek. So that matched. You know, there's a lot of information, electronic information, DNA information, crime scene photographs. It's all going to be introduced. And some people actually, I've seen in chats and other places and comments made that there are some people who, you know, believe that the prosecution has a very weak case against Brian Kohberger. And you and I have been on, homicide cases before. You've done a lot more work on them than I ever have, but you understand that, you just can't go run around bragging about what you got about that implicates someone. You've got a gag order here, so nothing is leaking out. And I think that's good. But the lack of information sometimes does unfortunately lend itself to people engaging in wild conspiracies that the case is lost. The reason why the prosecution isn't pushing for a certain date, like right now, they're still trying to put together their case. They don't have enough information to prosecute them, and they're going to lose their case. All kinds of amazing things. And that's the sad thing about the internet. It's got great amount of information, but you have people who are just conspiracy theorists and just going off on all kinds of wild tangents. We don't do that here. We go based on what we have our gut feeling, what our senses tell us, what our common sense tells us, what our experiences tell us. And so, listen to what we say, and we'll give you the accurate information. The idea that there was blood, it wasn't blood, touch DNA, it was blood DNA, and Newsweek just broke this, is shocking, because everyone understood right from the get-go that it was skin cell, oils and skin cells from a thumb, that sort of thing, and not blood. And why it was printed up suddenly is inexplicable. The mea culpa was half-hearted, and that, and they're a much more professional outfit than that. I'm surprised they did that. But the problem is, it gets people all riled up, and unfortunately, it gets people all riled up when the story isn't even true or even close to being true, and everyone knows it.
Well, Mike, it was not only that they printed that it was blood evidence, and I'm thinking, do they have a source that we don't
Right.
know about that wasn't put in the probable cause affidavit? Do they have another source that told them this is blood? Was there a leak from the lab? That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
And then the lame retraction, and then disrespectfully calling it the murder house. Is that a professional news organization that calls a place where 4 college students were murdered, calling it the murder house?
No, it's the crime scene. It's the address. It's not, you don't call it the murder house because, Brian Kohberger is going to go on trial for homicide. He has not been found guilty yet of any level of homicide. And to call it that is, it's cheap. It's unprofessional.
No, 100%, 100%. And Mike, one of the things I want to clear up too, and I want to ask you this, and I'm not an attorney. I know you have your law degree, and do I feel inferior? No, but I think it's a great thing in law enforcement that you're a law enforcement officer and have a law degree. And one of the things I wanted to ask was, it seems like the defense in this case has been given a blank check by the Judge John Judge, by not picking a date for the start of this trial. Basically, it's like, take all the time you need to go through this discovery, and when you get close, tell me, approximately. Right. And I'm not saying there's nowhere on record he said that, but that's what it seems to me right now, because there's no date. And I can only assume from that is that because this is a death penalty case with voluminous amounts of evidence, the judge wants to eliminate any potential for an appeal over the speedy trial thing, which also is really the prosecution's burden. And he's given the defense a blank check. Take as much time as you need. And is that okay?
Billy, it's unusual. It's very unusual. And especially just look at this case early on. The defense said, we're not going to waive our right to a speedy trial. We want an early trial date. And they set an early trial date. And everyone was really surprised because of the voluminous amount of discovery material that was being turned over to them. And, they have to get their team together. They have to get their investigators. They have to go through the record numerous times. You've testified at trials. I've testified. You go over each and every documents that you made, documents other people made, especially, and if it's a case like this where you have different agencies, you got to look at everything, familiarize yourself. There's no possible way, realistically, they could be ready. They said, we're not going to give up our speedy trial rights. We want an early trial. Then it's like, oh, wait a minute. We're going to go take a time out on this. We're going to waive our speedy trial rights. We want more time. And that was smart to do that. Why they ran for and demanded an early date early on was ridiculous. I'm glad they said, let's pause this machine for a while. We need time to look this over. That's wonderful. And I think the weird thing is there's no date right now on the calendar. Usually when, a defense or prosecution says to the judge, Your Honor, we're not going to be ready. We're not going to be ready. Usually it's the defense saying, we're not going to be ready. We're not going to be ready. The judge will say, okay, what do you need? Do you need 30 days? Do you need 90 days? Well, what are you looking at? You're looking at 180 days. Give me a date. The Judge John Judge, this is not his only case. He's got other motions. He's got here. He's got other cases pending. He might be doing he might be writing decisions in other cases that he's doing. He's got a very busy docket. He needs a date certain to begin this case, especially a case like this that you figure is going to be 4 weeks, 6 weeks with tons of information, witnesses, exhibits. He wants to have his calendar, certain. And to have this is with just uncertainty is very unusual, but I think he's doing it. It's frustrating for the prosecution. It's frustrating for the witnesses. It's frustrating for the relatives of the poor slain victims. But in the long run, from a prosecution's point of view and a justice point of view, it's a good thing because it will eliminate completely one avenue of appeal. If he is convicted, they could say, look, they can never claim that they were rushed into anything. By the time this comes to trial, we even were talking about, the summer of 2024. I think you and Phil even believed it was going to go even that far, and it might. And so therefore, they will never be able to make an appeal on that ground. There may be other grounds that will come up, but I think it's smart for the prosecution and the judge to just bend over backwards to say, look, give them as much time as they need. We all know he's not going anywhere, right? He's going to be staying in that jail. He's not going to go anywhere. Eventually, we'll get to trial, and we'll take care of the trial when we take care of it. But just being very solicitous, I think it's a smart move. It is frustrating for everybody, myself included. I want to see this done, but I think it's a smart move on the part of the prosecution to say whatever. The judge to say, okay, we'll take some more time here. We'll put a calendar date sometime in the future. We'll do it. We're not sure when. I think it's a good move overall.
Mike, one of the things that was some monologue you just gave, by the way. Excellent.
You pay me by the word, right? Isn't that how it works?
That's right. That's right. One of the things that I'm hearing a lot in the chat, and to me, it's very disheartening, and it's very just conspiracy theory-like.
Yeah.
People that are calling 1122 King Road a drug house. It's known drug house. This was a hit. This was more than one killer. The police are involved, and all of that stuff really drives me crazy because, first of all, if this was a drug house, the police would have had investigated. There'd be things on this house called kites, which are complaints on the house. And they would have a history of narcotics location. And because you bring in other law enforcement people as partners, specifically the FBI, you think the FBI is going to sit back and say, oh, yeah, this is a drug house and the police knew about it and are involved. You think they're going to sit there and do nothing about it? So that's like not, and then to claim that because this was a drug house and drugs were being sold and bought out of this house, that this was a drug hit. And I think there's absolutely no evidence of that. And that's, to me, that's disturbing. It's disturbing to the memories of these 4 young kids, and it's disturbing to everything about this case. When you say, oh, this was a drug hit, there's the kids up on the screen, and just, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Zaina Knodel, and Madison Mogan to besmirch their memory by saying that this was a drug hit is absolutely ridiculous. I want to play something that was made early on in this investigation, and it sort of gives everyone, and it's a 3D reenactment of what occurred. And I think even though it looks somewhat amateurish, I think it's really excellent in its presentation.
The neighborhood at 3:29 a.m. Approaching the house, he noticed the lights are on. This hinders his plan, and he now has to rethink things. He continues on to the back where he sees even more lights on. From the affidavit, we know he drove by the house 3 times in less than 5 minutes, probably trying to figure out what to do next. He finally decides to leave the area for a little while and observes the lights are on one last time in front as he drives off. Cameras show him leaving the neighborhood and exiting on Walenta Drive in this direction. It's uncertain which way he went from this point here, but we know that he is seen here at this location at 3:45 a.m., caught on a gas station security camera. Wondering if this could truly be a 2015 Elantra, I downloaded a known image of one with a similar angle of view. I then entered that into a 3D modeling software and added some lighting and then tilted the camera to get a similar angle. I then animated the image to be traveling at 40 miles per hour, giving motion blur, which ended with this result. Though not scientific, we can see very close similarities that this is a 2015 Elantra. Back to the map. We see the suspect re-enters the neighborhood at 4:04 a.m. He drives up to the house and slows down. Looking at the windows, he sees the lights are now off. Continuing to the back, he checks to see if those lights are off. They are. He's excited. He knows everyone is finally in bed, but he wants to check the front one last time. As he drives down, he's filled with adrenaline, seeing the lights are all off. His brain short circuits for a second as he clumsily tries to turn around in front of the house. It fails, but he regains composure and drives on. He's caught on camera making a 3-point turn at the end of the street to return back to the residence. He does his final drive to the back of the house. In the beginning, most of us believed the 2 surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, were sleeping on the 1st floor. Since then, we've learned Dylan was sleeping here on the 2nd floor, along with Xana and Ethan located here. Kaylee and Madison were located here on the 3rd floor. The dog was located on the 3rd floor and the room by itself. Let's move around and see through the walls into the kitchen, to the back slider, and take a look at the time frames. At 4:04 a.m., the suspect can be seen trying to park his car. At 4:09, approximately 5 minutes later, he enters the house through the back slider. At 4:18, he leaves the house after committing the crimes. At 4:20, he's caught on camera driving away at a high rate of speed. All of this only took 9 minutes. Let's watch what that looks like. The suspect enters through the back sliding door. He pauses at the stairs to look around to make sure no one's up. He then turns and goes upstairs. The first bedroom he stops at and opens the door, he sees no one there. He continues to the next bedroom. Here we know what happens. Downstairs, Dylan is sleeping. The noise from upstairs wakes her up. She thinks it's Kaylee playing with her dog. She gets up and goes to the door and looks out. She sees nothing there. The suspect then continues down the stairs about 3 minutes later. He then heads to Xana's room. Outside, there's a security camera picking up some whimpering, cries, and a thud at 4:17. We've learned that Xana was found on the floor, which might explain the thud. Dylan again hears something and looks outside her door. She sees the suspect. He walks right past her and leaves.
Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that reenactment, and of course the naysayers say to me, oh, well, you can't see him in the car. And you're right, I can't.
Right.
But when we talk about connecting the evidence, connecting the dots of the evidence, now we have his phone and the pings. And granted, the pings, as Howard Bloom from Airmail would let us know, they don't put him exactly in the kitchen, you know. But it does track his route. It tracks his car, the white Hyundai Elantra, right?
That's right.
A male fitting his description with bushy eyebrows, as described by Dylan Mortensen, is seen leaving the house. Are all of these things just, there's circumstantial evidence? There's not a solid piece of, smoking gun in that house right now. But, and as I said, ad nauseum, and I love that term, you connect the dots of the evidence. And then this evidence becomes extremely, extremely powerful. And, if that one of the things when we talk about reconnaissance, what is recon? Well, reconnaissance is going on, for lack of a better word, a dry run. Let me go check it out. Let me see what's going on in that house. About what time did they go to bed? The comings and going. Are there people out on the street, or the streets all empty? 12 recons. 12 times he reconned that location. Does that mean anything, Mike?
Bill, it's circumstantial evidence. If you're looking from a prosecutor's point of view and a detective's point of view, it's circumstantial evidence of guilt. It's, as we saw, consciousness of guilt. He's engaging in the precursors to the actual commission of the crime. If he'd been a marijuana user and he was buying marijuana in the neighborhood over the course of a semester, I think we would have heard about that by now. And that sort of thing. So there is possible that he could come up with a plausible explanation. However, we haven't heard anything yet. Maybe he will, but from a detective's point of view, a law enforcement point of view, it's reconnaissance, and it's the precursor to committing the crime. It's getting ready, figuring out, how do I get in? How do I get out? And being caught on camera that early morning hours of the homicide, on a number of different locations, even if you don't see him clearly in the driver's seat, it's very, very, very blurry, very dark. You've got the windows rolled up, you've got light bouncing off that, so you really don't see through the glass. It's all circumstantial evidence of a Hyundai, which fits his description of his car, being in that area, going all around, driving around, making U-turns, parking, leaving, going back. The idea that there's a tall, slim guy with bushy eyebrows, about 6 feet tall, matches his description perfectly. Maybe there's a perfectly plausible explanation for why it's not him. We'll find that out at the trial. But that reconnaissance is very important, because it goes to the intent. This is no accident. The theory is that this is no accident. This isn't a lover's quarrel. This isn't something that happened spur of the moment, violent encounter. No, this was something that was pre-planned, premeditated, gone over, and therefore it helps support the prosecution's going for the death penalty in this case.
Bittersweets that you're one of the people I'm talking about that doesn't. And look, I'm thrilled you have your own opinion and you don't have to buy into what we're saying.
No.
How are we to say he did it when we don't know? You're right, we don't know, but that's why this is the greatest country in the world, and he's going to get a trial by jury. He's going to get a fair trial. And if if the jury finds that there's doubt that he did it, then he'll be found not guilty. But if the prosecution proves beyond a reasonable doubt that he is guilty, he's rolling the dice with the death penalty.
That's right.
Because at some point, Mike and I have discussed it. At some point, there's a potential. Right now, we, the general public, we, the police off the cuff audience, we, the whole YouTube audience, have no idea the amount of evidence that the prosecution has, because they've just released very little of it to us by way of the warrant return, the probable cause affidavit, and what they have. So they could have tractor trailers full of more evidence that we don't know about. And again, they have to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. But some of the indicators you're seeing is what we previously discussed, Mike and I, when we said, well, why is the defense not asking for a date, for a trial date? To me, that's an indicator that they are not ready, and they are
They're not.
very much afraid to go to trial right now because they see what they're up against. Could I be wrong? Yeah, I could be wrong. That's my take on it right now. I think they're not ready, and there's tons of evidence against him, and they're going to try to figure out how to combat that evidence and to create doubt. That's their job.
And Billy, you know as well as I do, there's always going to be communication between Ms. Taylor, the defense attorney, and the prosecutor in this case, and that's going to go on many times over the course of the months and going into the trial time. Perhaps as they analyze the data, go over it, make sure the data is reliable from their own perspective. Maybe they have some experts that are going to look it over, you know, for the defense to say, is this the proper procedures to use for recovery of the DNA? Was the DNA recovered properly, analyzed properly, you know, stored properly? Do we agree with it? And that's going to take a long time. It's very expensive, and so they're doing their due diligence. They're doing the best they can. He probably has the best defense attorney in the state of Idaho for this kind of case because it is a death penalty case, and Ms. Taylor has handled a number of death penalty cases. And maybe by going very, very slow, there may be a willingness on the part, perhaps on the part of the prosecution to maybe come up with a plea bargain whereby his life would be spared. I don't know. Again, speculation, but the time, the length of time between arrest and the trial, it can only help the defense get ready, and it really can't hurt the prosecution at all. They're going to be ready when the judge says, "Are you ready?" They're going to say yes. So I don't think people should read into it, other than the prosecutor and the judge are being very solicitous of the defense to give them an opportunity to be fair, and this way they can't complain later on. I don't think it's anything more of that. No conspiracy theories. Oh my God, the prosecution doesn't know what they're doing. Oh no, not at all.
Mike, this gentleman on the screen is a writer. His name is Howard Bloom, and he writes for a magazine called Airmail. And he's been writing a series which is going to be turned into a book once this case is over. It's called The Eyes of a Killer, and he's on part number 6. And basically the protagonist in this month's part 6 is Steve Goncalves. And he talks about Steve Goncalves is Kaylee Goncalves' dad, one of the Idaho victims. And this Howard Bloom is talking about, there's Kaylee Goncalves is on the extreme left of this photograph that I have put on the screen. He's talking about how from the very beginning of this case, the most vocal person of all the parents of the victims was Steve Goncalves, and that he hired a private investigator, and he was really pushing the police because, as you recall, it took 6 weeks to make an arrest in this case, which by no means is a long time in a homicide investigation, because you need, as you've said numerous times, you need patience, and there was no patience in this case. They wanted an arrest the next day after this occurred.
Right.
And it took 6 weeks for there to be an arrest. So he had called out the Moscow police. He had called, and in no way am I criticizing Steve Goncalves. I would probably be doing the same thing if I was the dad of a victim. I would be impatient, and I would be very aggressive in the investigation. I'm not one that could sit by and wait. So Howard Bloom, of course, attached himself to that. And he wrote an article basically talking about Steve Goncalves and some of the information that he did find out in regards to his lone investigation with the private investigator. And I believe almost single-handedly, the gag order from the judge was issued because of Steve Goncalves and his him finding out information, him talking to the press at all different levels, I think that's what, in essence, caused the gag order. But at some point, he chilled out, and I still think he has his finger on the pulse of what's going on. But the family, the Goncalves family, they interviewed a lot of people themselves.
Yes.
And believe it or not, amateur investigators sometimes are great and can find out a lot of information. And I believe, and again, this is written nowhere. And when we talk about things that we can't prove, of course, we get criticized like all hell because we are professionals or former professionals in the crime fighting business. And he had what they said was evidence in regards to Brian Kohberger's, internet searches and the possibility that they had communicated Madison Mogen
Right.
with via Instagram, whether she was a willing participant or not. But early on in the investigation, they had evidence of that. But again, we found over the course of this investigation, there was so much false information. In fact, People magazine, they wrote saying that he had been in that Mad Greek restaurant. He was a regular customer, and that was totally not true. And another broadcast station reported that as the truth, and I think that was totally debunked. So if broadcast stations and journalists are putting out false information and there's a gag order, how are we to, the general public and us YouTube content creators supposed to find out what is true from what is just conjecture? And in the case of Newsweek, I think it was an accidentally on purpose mistake.
Yeah, Billy, early on, Mr. Goncalves, and our heart goes out to the Goncalves family. He was very critical. He had to get stuff off of his chest, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I'd be the same thing. I'd be just like all over demanding answers, wanting to know every step of the way, and everybody can understand that as a parent. But I think the Moscow Police Department probably gave information to the victims' families, but then when the victims' families started going to the press, and some information came out about position of the bodies and speculation as to who fought back or who did this or who did that. Stab marks, I think, were mentioned about from one of the members of the medical examiner's office. After an autopsy, all this information just goes from these people to the officials to the family's ears, but then unfortunately it then gets out to the public, and then it just blows up a little bit. And I think Moscow was smart to just dial back their communications, which obviously was really frustrating to the families. And you could understand as a dad, Mr. Goncalves hiring a private investigator. One of the dangers with that is, Billy, what happens if you're the sergeant in the homicide unit. Phil's the detective. Phil goes out and gets a statement from somebody. Okay, it's memorialized in a DD5. I'm a private gumshoe, or I'm just a nosy body, and I go out there and I interview the same person, and I'm getting all kinds of information that I'm interpreting slightly differently from what Phil has, and then that now becomes known. And so now, by doing that, at the trial, you may have, you have Sergeant Bill Cannon, the homicide unit. You've got, Detective Grimaldi, and he's going to present his findings to the jury and testify. But then you've got little old Mike Geary over here, who's an amateur gumshoe, thinks he knows everything. He's going to get involved and interject himself, and the information he gets may actually be contradictory to the defense or to the prosecution's witnesses, and that can throw a monkey wrench into the works, both to hurt or help the prosecution, or to hurt or help the defense. And so, absolutely, the Moscow Police Department, the FBI, the Idaho State Police, they do not want people, good, well-intentioned, bright people, running around as free agents. And you don't want that. What happens if they intimidate a witness? What happens if they say the wrong thing? What happens if they actually tell the witness something as they're questioning them that may actually not be fact, but they may have heard third hand? So it's a tough position for the families. I'm just sorry that Mr. Bloom is kind of attached himself, right? and is looking to make a killing off of the misery of the victims. And it's beneath him. It shouldn't be.
You know, Mike, this is on the screen. That's Howard Bloom. I want to read a little excerpt from his article. Again, this is from Airmail magazine. I think that Mr. Bloom is an outstanding writer.
No
Based
doubt.
on what I've read, though, I don't like him as a person, and I've never met him. But he's quite arrogant. He's quite an elitist, and I just don't like some of the way he refers to people. Anyway, that's me. Anyway, after some digging, he's referring to Steve Goncalves. He grew convinced he had the informant in his sights. He was preparing to reach out to the individual to get right in his face and confront him. He would explain that he was empowered by a. Hang on one second. I think I'm in the. What he was talking about, Steve Goncalves had told that two survivors allegedly had not only been awake while the killings had taken place, but that they had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources alleged that the two girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from room to the next. Now, if that is true, this is the first time we've heard about that. If this is true, it's quite disturbing. If this is true, it can be easily verified because the police took both Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk's phones, and they have all of the information. So did Steve Goncalves have a source from the grand jury that was feeding him information? Because first of all, folks, that's illegal. Grand jury proceedings are supposed to be secret. If you're a grand juror, you could be charged with leaking information from the grand jury to a, in this case, the father of one of the victims. And so I'll just read a little more. And so Steve intensified his efforts to get answers. And in that dogged process, he came to believe that the government must have a protected source, an informant who could provide testimony that would tighten the screws that held together the case against Kohberger. Steve, and we're referring to Steve Goncalves, was determined to talk to them. He did not want to wait for the trial to get the knowledge he needed. For his peace of mind, he needed relief right now. And again, this is an article by Howard Bloom. There's a picture of him on the screen. He writes for Airmail magazine, former New York Times journalist, former Vanity Fair journalist, Pulitzer Prize nominated. And as I said, excellent writer, not an excellent human being in my humble opinion. But so he later on in the article, he indicates that, again, and this is not verified by any law enforcement sources. I am, in essence, doing what I did. I'm reporting what Howard Bloom is reporting as fact, and we don't know if it is fact. I'm just mentioning to you guys, and again, as I did with Newsweek, I qualified it by saying I don't know if what they're reporting has any truth whatsoever, and I showed the probable cause affidavit. In this case, I don't have any affidavit to show you. However, what I do have is proof that they did take both phones of Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk. And of course, part of the investigation would be to empty those phones out of all incoming, outgoing phone calls, text messages, pictures, every single thing they have on there. And so if this is in fact true, the prosecution has all of it. And of course, then they would have to turn that over to the defense. So one of the issues I raised the other night when I covered this was Dylan Mortensen saw the killer. She's an eyeball witness to the killer leaving the house.
Mhm.
She describes the killer as a tall, thin man, athletic, not muscular, with bushy eyebrows. And he had, I guess, what we now have grown to call a COVID mask, a mask
Right.
that's covering up to the bridge of your nose. Now, you could identify most people if even their face is covered up to their eyes, the shape of their face, the shape of their head. And I'm not saying it's a 100% ID, but
Mhm.
potentially you could identify someone. So my question is, and people were shocked at this, could she pick out Brian Kohberger? Could she identify him in the courtroom as the person she saw walk out of the house that morning? If she can do that, and I'm not going to use the term slam dunk, but it's very, very powerful evidence.
Yeah, Bill. The Bethany Frank and Dylan Mortensen, they were there. They were texting, uh, and the fact that they were texting while the homicides were taking place doesn't mean they were ignoring, uh, loud screaming, violent, things being thrown around and all kinds of stuff. And they were just, disregarding it, cold shoulder. Oh, what's going on? They just start texting their friend. No, they were exhausted. It was after 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody was out partying. We know the holiday that was weekend for Thanksgiving. It was like a week just before Thanksgiving. They're probably exhausted. I myself have texted my daughters, early in the morning, like, are you going out? Do you need an early ride to the train station? And, you can text while other things are going on in the house that you may not even be aware of. At one point, I think there was a comment that Dylan Mortensen thought that Ms. Goncalves was having a party with her dog. I think the term was party. And that party, the term party could be just, they're just roughhousing around in a bedroom, joking around with the dog. Not that there's, 25 people dancing to music and drinking. No. So the idea that they could be texting while the homicides are taking place, to me, that's interesting. To me, it's not disturbing because, you're in a house, you're in separate floors, separate rooms. And but for Mr. Bloom, he's always looking for an angle to make something that may actually be fact, to make it to slant in some way that tries to add to the horror or the macabreness, if that's a word, of the situation. Mr. Goncalves may be getting some information from a grand juror, and then it coming out in Mr. Bloom's writing again. He's looking to make a buck. He's looking to make a ton of bucks when this case comes to trial, because he'll have the book already written and it'll already be edited, already be printed and ready to go. And I feel bad for Goncalves family that perhaps their misery, their sorrow is you have somebody attached to them at the hip, talking to them, and may actually be really looking for a payout rather than trying to help the Goncalves family.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime or true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and ring that bell. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. You see the folks in the green font. They're part of our YouTube channel, our YouTube friends, our YouTube family, and we really appreciate them. The whole thing with these writers, I think James Patterson, the famous writer, is also writing a book on this case. So, some of the things that Howard Bloom, and I brought his writing up before, and as I said, I believe he's an excellent writer.
Oh, he is.
I don't think he knows a hell of a lot about investigation. I don't think he knows a hell of a lot about people. He's disparaging against the town of Moscow, Idaho. He's disparaging against things he sees as beneath him, and right when he gets that way, criticizing the very people who deal with some of the worst things on this earth, the police, and he's looking at them from his ivory tower. I don't have a lot of respect for that. Folks, one of the things in the Gilgo Beach case that case also hasn't gone to trial, but is huge evidence, is the computer of Rex Uerman, who is the alleged Gilgo Beach killer, who's in jail right now for that. The searches that he made on his computer, some of them were just horrific, and I don't want to go into it here. Not just that, he was also doing counterinsurgency, basically, against the police. He was looking to see by his computer searches what the police were doing on the Gilgo Beach investigation. So that's common too. And we don't even know, from the perspective of Brian Kohberger, what was he doing on his computer, because that's never been turned over. We don't know. So there's other evidence that potentially could be huge. And again, we don't know about it. And again, when that is turned over, we'll get a bigger view into the life of Brian Kohberger, of course, who is innocent until proven guilty. We're just pointing out so many of the things in this case that point towards the fact that they have the right person.
Yeah, Billy, as you say, there's a lot of information that thankfully hasn't been leaked, and that's a good thing, and it will come to trial, and it'll be presented to the court, to the jury, and to the public then. Unfortunately, you do one of the results is you get people into talking about conspiracies and things like that. But you're right, there's tremendous information that with the Rex Uerman case, that once he saw that when Rodney Harrison came in like January of 2022 and said, we're going to take another fresh look at this case, he got very nervous. So, probably he was checking that out nonstop because he's a control freak and he's scared. And also with the Kohberger case, you live your life on your laptop, on your phone. You for anything that you want to figure out at all in this world, you just Google it on your phone, and it's a permanent record. It's never deleted or destroyed. It will always be a permanent record, and so therefore there is tremendous amount of information, and the public isn't even aware of it. You and I know how these things work a little bit better than most of the public, but I think the public should be aware that the information that they know about right now, evidence against Uerman and Kohberger, what they see right now, what they know right now, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
100%.
That's exactly why, but he was stalking them, he was hunting them.
The maximum penalty for that offense, if you plead guilty or are found guilty, is up to death and or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
This was probably a person that blends into the background.
Yeah, from Pennsylvania. We actually don't have crosswalks.
His neighbors and people who know him superficially would probably never guess that he had any violent tendencies.
It's disgusting to think about someone that used to hang out with all the time could do something like this.
Are you waiving your right to a speedy preliminary hearing?
Yes.
If you got to know him well, you would see layers of things that were a bit off or different.
What I do know is that Brian did have anger issues.
You could tell there was some off about him. Very quiet, calculated about what he says. Actually very similar to how he walked into court, no different.
I'm just curious about the law. I don't mean to...
Oh, no, yeah, I can find it for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everything that I've read about Brian Kohberger would fit the type of person that we would expect for doing a crime like this.
All right, we've got some news tonight, some new information released, and this is the deal, but we've got what the requests are from their warrant. First, Amazon data. Take a look. All detailed customer click activity pertaining to knives and accessories. All details of items in carts to to include all items added to the cart, all items removed or deleted from the cart, and all items saved in the cart, wish listed or shopping baskets. They want to know what the accused killer was shopping for on Amazon. Next one, very interesting. Spotify, search queries, streaming history, playlists, user library, browsing history, account settings, interactions with other Spotify users, user third-party services, devices, and applications in connection with the Spotify service. Next one is even more interesting, related to Spotify. User device sensor data to include motion-generated or orientation-generated device sensor data. Had no idea that Spotify did this, which the user device collects about the way the user moves or holds their device. Okay, from Apple, the contents of all emails associated with the account, including stored or preserved copies of emails sent to and from the account. The contents of all instant messages associated with the account, including stored or preserved copies of instant messages, including iMessages, SMS messages, and MMS messages sent to and from the account, including all draft and deleted messages. And don't forget, folks, this is on the docket, motion to dismiss. It's a big, big hearing.
It's pretty amazing, right? So think of all of that information that they're requesting. And, you know, one of the things this underlines for us normal citizens is what an open book we all are.
Yeah.
Based on our just demanding in our life, the convenience of shopping online, of the convenience of listening to Spotify on our phone, the convenience of having that little phone in your hand, the computer, the traveling computer, of text messages, of instant messaging, of, you know, I don't have to list all of them. I'm not, you know, it's funny. I'm as good at the computer as a 60-something-year-old guy can get, and better than most people my age, but not in the league of the kids. You know,
Right.
My kids look at me and they go, "Dad, what'd you do that for?" And I'm just like, I don't know any better, you know. And but again, the conveniences we get through this also, we're giving up privacy. I remember years ago, my brother used to say, "Oh, I don't want Easy Pass. I don't want the government tracking me." I go, "You're a fool." That was like 20 years ago. I go, "How do you feel now?" You know, Easy Pass is the least intrusive thing now compared to now. I just want to, Wildflowers. Thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. It's funny how the people who think Brian is innocent never talk about the fact that his knife wasn't found in his apartment or his parents' house. What happened to it? Well, you know something, it's not unusual for someone involved in a crime to get rid of evidence, to get rid of, in this case, the murder weapon, in this case, to get rid of bloody clothing, in this case, to get, look, when they arrested him in Pennsylvania, he had gloves on at like 4 a.m. and he was throwing his garbage into his neighbor's garbage pail. I've never been caught doing that. Even when my garbage overflows, I've never been seen to. Is that in the now famous Gearyism, consciousness of guilt? Is that what that was? Why was he throwing his garbage in his neighbor's garbage pail?
Right,
Mike.
Billy. Yeah, Billy. You know, it's just like you've handled these homicides where somebody will get shot and you never find the firearm that is registered in their name. It's gone. It's disappeared. They'll tell you, "Oh, I lost that years ago." You know, people come up with all kinds of excuses. So it's not fatal at all in any way, shape, or form to a case where the firearm or the bloody knife or the blunt instrument isn't found. Especially if they can come up and find that he bought a knife that kind of fits the description through Amazon months ago. So therefore, it's not fatal. Would you love to have it as a prosecutor? Yes. There's nothing more than I would want to have that knife in my hand as I introduce it into evidence through a witness, through a detective. And once we establish what the reliability of it, I get to show it to the jury and let the jury actually hold it in their hand and just to touch it and give them that tactile sense. That's fantastic. You can't beat that. However, not having it, that's not fatal whatsoever, because you've got his DNA on the sheath. You've got all the knife wounds. You've got tremendous amount of information tying him to this case. So the lack of that dicky that we talked about months ago, and talking about it today, and the lack of having the knife, not fatal whatsoever. Not one bit. Would I love to have it? Yes, but you work around it.
Wildflower S. Yeah, I meant that if he was innocent, his knife would have been found. Yes, I get it. Not
sure.
Wildflower.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Schmitty, thank you for the $4.99 super sticker. Is there any info on the house being demolished? I sure hope they leave it until after the trial's finished. Radio silence is good, in my humble opinion. Schmitty, I think that even the voices we have on YouTube and some of, like I said right from the beginning, they can't knock that house down. That is so important as evidence, especially if and when this case goes to trial, to walk the jury right through that house. I think that is invaluable. Any kind of 3D recreation, photograph, nothing is the same as walking through that house and seeing exactly where the killer walked, where the victims were found. All of those things is so true. So the house isn't knocked down yet, is it? And the University of Idaho had intended to knock it down over the summer. So there must have been tremendous pushback to that. And I think they backed down because, after all, they own that house right now, donated by the owner, because I would think it's basically unsellable at this point. So they own it. And I think they've backed down from that position of wanting the house to be knocked down because I think if they knocked it down at this point before a trial, they would get so much pushback. Folks, if you're looking for a great attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a fantastic former police officer who is now a great attorney, defense attorney. You can get a hold of Joe on his cell at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com or go on his website, jmurray-law.com. And Joe, besides being a fantastic attorney, has helped us tremendously on the Police Off the Cuff podcast, a tremendous supporter, and we appreciate everything he's done for us. So, some of the things that, we wanted to get out there tonight, of course, first and foremost, was the Newsweek retraction of saying that there was blood DNA evidence on the K-bar sheath, which we found out was an error. I mean, something, retracting an error in that way was almost like not even admitting to making the error. I just thought it was a lame retraction. And the fact that most people didn't see it or will never see it is not accidental either. So again, and as I reported it on the last show, was not as this is fact, this is what Newsweek is saying. And then we compared it against the probable cause affidavit. The other thing, of course, is Howard Bloom and the Dickies suit that supposedly he alleges, and there is a receipt for that in the warrant return.
That's right.
And was Brian Kohberger wearing a suit like that covered his entire body and no doubt would have had little booties, except maybe not, because there was a bloody footprint with a certain type of shoe.
That's right.
On the downstairs floor. So did he neglect to? That's why I think this has to be much more forensic evidence that we just don't know about. That's never been released. I cannot understand it the way most people can't, that there is not more forensic or blood evidence left inside that house that has yet to be reported. And would all of it have been already handed over in discovery, Mike, or could it be held back?
At this point, Bill, I would believe 99% certain that everything in the prosecution's files, every result of every single test, every single photograph, every single, fingerprint analysis, you name it, everything that they've done has been turned over. It's voluminous. They're at the point now. We know the defense has gone over things many times, and they're looking at strategy at this point. As we've talked about this before over the past couple of months, they want to know the training of people who lifted fingerprints or took crime scene information from that location. So therefore, they're well on their way to trying to critically analyze everything the police did, their training, how long they've been on the force, what they did, and they're doing the best they possibly can to represent Brian Kohberger, and that's fine. But I doubt seriously if there's even a single thing that hasn't been turned over. I know they were complaining that they wanted results of DNA so that they could try to identify the source of male DNA, like maybe 2 or 3 sources that are unknown. And the answer to that was and is, they weren't tested, and therefore, and they're probably people who've come and gone. If I went to that house a week before the slayings and I just left my fingerprints somewhere, or I touched something, I left my some skin cells, some touch DNA on a doorknob, and it wasn't disturbed, my DNA would be there. There's many people's DNA that can be there that have nothing whatsoever. There's no guilt associated with its presence there. But they're trying their best, and they're good. They know what they're doing. They're doing the best they possibly can for their client. That is their ethical duty. But everything's been 99.99% sure everything's been turned over. Why would you hold anything back at this point? It's way too long now. They've turned it all over.
Pharaoh Gamma, in forensic science, Locard's principle holds that the perpetrator of a crime will bring something into the crime scene and leave with something from it, and that both can be used as forensic evidence. Pharaoh Gamma, you're preaching to the choir. Dr. Edmund Locard, Locard's principle of exchange, one of the first forensic scientists that, published that, again, you could walk into anywhere and leave something from your body, whether it's hairs. Apparently, we lose hundreds of hairs off our head. If you still have hair, I have a little bit, off your head every day. And same thing, skin cells, you leave things there. So thank you, Pharaoh Gamma, for pointing that out. Muddy Paws. Bill, in your career, have you seen a witness freeze for hours like the witness in this case? Muddy Paws, nothing like this. However, many times witnesses have to be, is the word prodded correct, or just interviewed and gone over what they actually seen to remind them of what they actually saw. Because sometimes your recollection isn't quite up to a snuff until someone starts asking you very specific questions about what you saw. And believe it or not, it works. And it's not suggesting things to the witness. It's just helping them to refresh their memory. But Money Post, to answer your question, I never saw a witness anything similar to these witnesses that were in a house where this horrific crime occurred and yet didn't report it for 8 hours. I never saw anything of that nature. Sizzy Q Down Under, thank you so much for the $3 super sticker. Very much appreciated. Sky Ricky, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Thank you, all you folks, and thank you for joining us tonight. I think it's this case is still so interesting, and it's one of these cases that is both heartbreaking, but yet at the same time fascinating. Fascinating, where it keeps the public and keeps everyone glued to their seats. But I always like to remind everyone at least once or twice when we cover this topic is that on the screen now are the 4 victims: Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, Zaina Knodel, and Madison Mogan. And that's why we cover this, and that's why the police and the prosecution are working so hard for these 4 young people who also leave behind many, many people that love them. And that's, in essence, what this case is about. And again, the evidence and the police work and all of that stuff, it's so important because just the stakes are so high in this case. And what if after all of this, Brian Kohberger is the guy, but walks? How would you feel? How would the families feel? And again, everyone is innocent to proven guilty. Everyone is guaranteed by our Constitution, a fair and impartial trial by a jury of your peers. And, that could happen. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen at a trial. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, we'll have to live as a society with whatever happens. We've seen this in some high profile cases, the OJ case, the Robert Blake case, things like that. We've seen this sort of thing, and we have to live with it. Nothing's perfect. We don't have a perfect system, but we have a damn good system, and it works well when it's not overloaded too much. But you have excellent defense attorneys. You've been on the receiving end of their treatment. So have I. So has Phil. We don't like it, but they are passionate about what they do. They're excellent. He's got Brian Kohberger's got excellent representation, and in New York, Rex Sherman has excellent representation. These gentlemen know what they're doing. And Ann Taylor in Idaho knows what she's doing. So let's have faith in the system that you'll have 12 jurors with exercising their common sense and coming to the best conclusion based on the evidence that is presented to them by both the prosecution and defense. And then we live with it, and then we move on.
100%. Montana Mama, thank you for the $4.99 super sticker. I wonder if that's Jackson Hole, Montana, that you're in that picture. You're going skiing there. Beautiful place. Jane C., thank you so much for the $3.99 super sticker. Cleveland versus the world. Why would Cleveland versus the world? But I guess that's where you're from. Congratulations. I hope you're a Cleveland Brown fan. Joe from South Oz, thank you for the $5 super sticker. Love the Police Off the Cuff family. Bill and Mike, thank you so much for your support. And all you folks that are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining. I'm just about at 55,000. I'm slowly building this house one brick at a time, as they say. I wish I could get more bricks at a time than one brick at a time, but I'll do it. What do they say about like turtles? Slow and steady wins the race. Well, I'll take it a little faster if I could. Bella Finn, I'd be happy because as a parent he will get justice. Sorry, he wouldn't survive for long. Bella Finn, welcome. I see you in the chat all the time. Thank you so much. Bobby Swain. Bobby, we're not sure. It seems like the trial could be far off right now. They're not picking a date. We just were discussing that. Venus Gal, our system is going to hell. Sorry, but it is. Lifetime spent just to get to a hearing, much less a trial. It's ridiculous, not even talking this case, but all of them. Yeah, Venus Girl, it's frustrating, but as they say, the wheels of justice, they turn very slowly, but they don't grind to a halt. And that's why we still have the best system in the world, even though it moves slow sometimes. Brichella and Peter Pranzo, thank you for all you do. Thank you for always being two of our best moderators. Miss Chris, well, if he gets a fair trial and is found guilty, then his appeal will be harder. That's all I meant, that what he did to them has no injustice. Miss Chris, I totally agree with you. And thank you for joining the show, being in the chat. Mike, I think we did a hell of a damn good job tonight covering this case. I can't reach my shoulder anymore because I'm getting arthritis. And I reach back and I'm like, oh, everything hurts these days, But Cheated No More, thank you so much for the $2 super sticker. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone that came by tonight. Mike, I'm going to let you have your last words, and then we're going to say, now it's time to say good night. All right.
No, everybody should just keep the faith. If you're looking at the Rex Sherman case, in the Gilgo Beach killer case in Long Island in New York, or you're looking at the Brian Kohberger case in Idaho, yeah, the wheels of justice do grind very slowly. It's a very frustrating process, but it's made that way to give people due process and to try to give everyone the ability to get representation in court when they're facing, these tremendous charges. So keep the faith and listen to what we have to put out there. Rather than conspiracy theorists, because we're going to give you the good stuff, the truth, through experience and knowledge, rather than just out and out wild speculation. So just keep the faith.
100%. Folks, I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next time.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.